Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to The Good Life or Living the Dream, brought to you by Arrow 92.7 FM from Masterton, New Zealand, for those of you who live far away. And this is a series of programs devoted to those who've moved to the country or who are thinking of living on a lifestyle block. This series is kindly sponsored by Joe and Kelly of Real Estate Agents in Carterton. Now today we have two guests. We've got Marnie Rutherford, and we have Sarah Ferguson. So thank you for giving up Sutherland. Why did I call you? Oh, Sarah Ferguson is the British princess. So you're a princess.
Not
for the
like
moment.
nothing like it all.
So thank you very much. And today we're going to sort of look at, we've moved on from buying the block and looking at what you need as a house or shelter, and we're going to talk about sheep. But before we get on to that, Marnie, would love to know a bit more about your life and how you got to this point in time of living in Wellington. Oh, not Wellington. Oh, I'm really getting mixed up now. Living in the Wairarapa.
Oh, yeah, sure. Hi. I came to New Zealand about 15 years ago and had always wanted to find somewhere that was a bit of land on that I could keep some sheep and some chooks and maybe a couple of cows and that kind of thing, and live that idyllic life. I hadn't really settled in any one place for most of my adult life. I'd travelled and worked around a number of different countries, and then I came to New Zealand and managed to find my little property in the Wairarapa, and I've been there ever since.
And that's a good few years now.
Yeah, 15 years.
15 years.
I've been running in the UK we call it a small holding, here they call it a lifestyle block. Really all about the self-sufficiency and just about growing your own veggies and growing your own meat and looking after animals and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and the follower of John Seymour. I've always got to get him in.
Yes,
John Seymour wrote this book called Self-Sufficiency in the 70s or 80s.
70s, I think.
Yes, and we all got sort of blown away how easy it was going to be. We're all going to go and move on to these lifestyle blocks. I think, post-war there was a bit more money around and people started to think again about going back to the land, not so much to make a living, but to really, experience the land. And Sarah, you're Canadian. You
Originally from a sheep farm in Quebec, which is the French part of Canada.
Okay.
And I worked as a shepherd in different places in Canada and the US and New Zealand, and did a couple of university degrees, and then I came to New Zealand, did my veterinary training at Massey in Palmerston North.
So you've got quite a wide range of qualifications, plus the on hands-on stuff in the Wairarapa. I think that's how we all got to know you. So now let's start with talking about sheep. I mean, a lot of people, when they do go into a lifestyle block, that's the one animal beside the chickens. Chickens seem to come first, and then they look towards sheep. So, Sarah, I'm going to ask you, what are the main breeds that lifestyle block people are looking at?
When you talk about breeds, I have a number of people who say this breed is the perfect breed, and they try to persuade me that's better than every other breed. And to me, any breed, as long as you've got a healthy animal, good sound feet, and productive, able to have lambs every year, adapted to their environment, then any breed of sheep can be the perfect breed of sheep.
And but just let's mention a few names or breed types, because Marnie, you've tried to focus on one type now. You've been keeping a little flock going.
Yeah, not so much. My flock, I've been breeding sheep now for 15 years, so for as long as I've been in the Wairarapa, and I started off with your good old basic Romney. Which
is that the most common one?
Romney forms the vast majority of the New Zealand flock, is either Romney or Romney based commercially, and they're just available everywhere. They are good, solid, robust,
and they look like sheep.
And they look like sheep. Yeah.
Yes.
If a kid draws a sheep, it's going to be a Romney pretty much 9 times out of 10.
Little round ears and a nice round tummy and soft fur. I mean,
wool.
Well.
Yeah, so I started off with Romneys, but I've been crossbreeding for a long time. So I found with the Romneys that the wool can become coarser as they get older. I'm a hand spinner as well, so I spin the fleece.
Cool.
I'm looking for a decent carcass to go in the freezer, but I'm also looking, like you saying there, Sarah, about I want a sheep that's got good feet, good parasite resistance, all of those. I want the ultimate sheep, basically. That's what I've been working towards.
Yes. The perfect sheep.
The perfect sheep. Some are a crossbreed.
Have we found one yet?
Well, mine do pretty good, actually. They're quite resistant to most things. I get the odd one that's a bit of a throwback, but they're usually pretty good.
Yeah.
Each individual's always going to have their own little characteristics, quirks and problems. Idiosyncrasies, yes, that's it.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking, Sarah. That, I mean, when you say everyone, has their own sort of idea which is the best one, but it's a bit of a trial and error, isn't it, for a lot of people to see what suits their land, what suits their way of looking after the sheep.
Yeah, and there's some novelty breeds that were more recently introduced to New Zealand that haven't been selected for this environment, so they can have more health problems just because the Romneys have been here so long. The ones with health problems have been sort of weeded out.
Oh, right, of course, yes. So the newer breeds, what are they?
If I name any names, I'm going to have people angry at me.
but I can say it that we tried keeping a dorper. And I know it's because we come from South Africa and we knew that they were good for meat and everything. But within the first week, we had feet problems. They're not used to damp climates, and they're bred for dry, hard areas. And so I can mention that. I can say that.
Common in the Dorper breed. So.
Yes, common in the Dorper breed. And mine started to kneel for us. And I thought that was really well trained to sort of acknowledge that we were the owners. But I realised that there was big problems with their feet. So there are a few breeds that have more tendency to various issues. But that's interesting. So Romney actually have bred out a lot of those. Sort of, they've been bred now for this country.
Yeah, the merinos are the same. You get a lot of merinos on the South Island up in the high country.
Yep.
Because they do very, very well there. They've been, merinos were one of the first breeds of sheep that was introduced to New Zealand,
Correct.
I believe.
Yeah.
And so they've been up there for such a long time. Yeah. All the ones that didn't do well have been culled out of the national flock, and now we're left with the ones who do really well.
Which is not to say you can't find Romneys that don't have bad feet and
absolutely. You're always you're always going to get throwbacks and problems. You're always going to get issues. I mean, sheep. Asking what kind of sheep is a bit like asking what kind of dog. There are so many different breeds of sheep, so many different breeds of dog. You buy the dog to fit what you need, and it's the same with sheep. You buy the sheep to fit what you need.
So what advice would you give to a new lifestyler if they're starting to look at sheep? Do they go to a book or listen to our program, maybe?
Talk to the vet.
Talk to the vet. Talk to the vet.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a very good idea because
and talk to experienced people like Marnie that have already have the lifestyle block situation,
and in the area they're living,
or
planning to live.
Talk to your neighbours.
You have this every time. Talk to your neighbours.
Yeah.
I quite agree. And a lot of people just go to the local sales and buy sheep, and that's not always the best idea because we've had a few little not knowing what we're getting.
Yeah.
So that would have been better to have asked someone to go with you to sort of guide you through that whole process.
Yeah, that's what I did when I started off with this. When I bought a couple of cows and I bought some sheep. That was how I started off. And one of my neighbours, she used to buy calves in and fatten them on. So I took her with me to the sale, and she picked out a couple of like-looking ones, and I bought those. And the same with the sheep. I took another neighbour up with the sheep. Okay. Same thing. Because, I mean, I didn't know. You know, I know one end from the other, but that was pretty much about as much knowledge as I had at the time.
Does this shock you, Sarah, the way, I mean, I think last time a lot of people, we've said some of us have, had some vague contact with the land, but we really haven't got that knowledge. So we kind of walk into this semi-blind in a way.
It's a bit of a generalization, but on the whole, as a veterinarian, I've found a lot of lifestyle block owners really keen to learn. They really want to do well. Mm-hmm. And you do see probably more welfare issues on lifestyle blocks, and not because of cruelty or just because of not knowing, just a knowledge gap.
That knowledge gap, people, with a lot of animals, I think you just put them on the land. and they're going to survive, and you don't have to do much. But what would be your guideline to start looking for? I mean, you have to have inoculation, other things, or?
Yeah, you can't expect that your sheep will be just out on the grass and you don't do anything with them. You have to watch them every day. You have to make sure they have food and water, and nutrition is critical. And with a sheep, because of the fleece, you can't tell how fat they are just by looking at them. Good nutrition will solve 85% of your health problems.
Oh, right. So pasture's a real issue. You need to make sure you've got good pasture and enough.
And some way of controlling it, either by changing the number of animals on it to follow the growth curve, or by topping when it gets too long.
Right, yes, because sheep like it reasonably short.
Yeah, they're nibblers.
They're nibblers. They're not like a cow.
Not like cows. Cows like long grass that they can wrap their tongue round, but sheep are nibblers.
They're nibblers. I mean, if you look at the teeth, you can see that. Yes.
And grass, as it gets longer, it loses quality.
Yeah.
Okay.
The highest quality grass is the short.
It's the short one.
Sweet green grass.
So would you say you have to replant pastures, or is that just rotation? If you've got, you see, what worries me a little bit about lifestyle blocks, they are often quite small.
Yes.
And too many animals on too little space.
And they don't have the flexibility where a large farm can sell animals to the sale when they're running low on pasture. And for a block that has only pet animals, that can be hard to do. So if you don't have a way of sending animals off, you need to find somewhere else to graze them when your pasture gets short, which in the Wairarapa is the summer dry.
Yes, we do have that period where everything virtually stops growing in a way. I'm always fascinated. I always think the Wairarapa is like a bathtub. At a certain time, the plug's drawn and everything dries. And it really does very quickly, literally within a week or two. So yes. So Marnie, you had quite a bit of land in the one down Somerset Road when you lived.
Yeah, the first house that I had here, I had quite a few acres, but I moved a couple of years ago I downsized again, down to a smaller place, and I've got just under 4 acres now. So what you were saying there, Sarah, about managing that, when you have a smaller acreage, managing that is quite difficult. It's a much finer line.
Right.
So when the pasture burns off, as it does in the Wairarapa around about Christmas time, if you've only got a small acreage, there's nowhere to go. There's nowhere to send these animals because your 4 acres or whatever it is burned off.
Yes.
Unless you can send them off farm, or the alternative is to buy in feed from outside, which is what most people tend to do. But that can get expensive. So managing those stock numbers to make sure you've got the right numbers for your property, and that number will fluctuate through the year depending on how much grass you've got. It's quite difficult, and I mean I've been at my new place for 2 years and I have not got it right yet.
Okay.
I've gone the other way. I tend to err on the side of caution. I've got too little stock rather than too much,
which is better than too much.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I bought myself a heifer calf to try and take up some of the slack, if you will, because my sheep just aren't cutting it. But I know when the sheep lamb in the spring, then my sheep numbers are back up again. My sheep numbers basically double, and then I'm going to have to start feeding out for that cow because she will take up all of that spare feed that I need. So it's just about balance, really, about making sure you understand what the nutritional requirements of different stock are, and looking at them every day so you can see when they start to change, when they start to lose weight, when they start to lose condition, when they start to look not quite as happy as maybe they should do, and then you can address the problem straight away.
I mean, it was interesting, Sarah, when you said you can't always tell them by just looking at them. You've got to feel.
That's right. You put your hand on the back behind the ribs and in front of the pelvis. It's called the short ribs, and and if you look online, you'll find body condition scoring charts and guides and even videos.
Right. Okay.
Quite easily, just, are they too thin? Are they too fat? Are they just right?
Yeah.
And a lot of lifestyle blocks are too fat, and that's less of a problem than too thin.
Oh, that's interesting, because they better pasture was just given more. I mean, the big sheep stations, they've got much more space, and the animals can at least move on, and they get moved from pasture to pasture. But as you're saying, Marnie, on a smaller place, it's not that easy.
There's also a saying, if you name your sheep, they're too fat.
Well, we've
Oh
had,
dear.
But that's not always true.
yeah, we've had this little conversation about the pet
Yeah.
and the one that you're going to slaughter or use for other reasons. Do you name yours? You don't slaughter for as do you? Or?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, so
Okay.
my sheep are all multi-purpose. I'm spinning the fleece, I'm eating the meat. They're basically lawnmowers keeping the grass down. They're very multifunctional, but that's what I like about them. They will do everything for you. They will feed you, they will clothe you, they will look after your land.
Oh, you're very self-sufficient at that moment when you said that.
Yeah, I know, right? But they're very multifunctional like that. So which is why human beings have kept sheep for
centuries.
thousands of years.
Yes.
That's just where they are.
I mean, it's fascinating where sheep actually originate. Different types come from different areas, and as you said, they might not always be adaptable to New Zealand, which is a much wetter climate. Because as I grew up in South Africa, and there were a lot of merino, I have to say, but it was dry. I mean, the sheep area was dry.
Yeah.
I always used to wonder how they survived, but they did.
Knowing I was coming here today, I Googled. I got on good old Google, and Google tells me that there are around 1,000 breeds of sheep worldwide.
Really? Different types?
Yep. But there are about 30 main breeds in New Zealand.
As many as that?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a lot. But as Sarah was saying before, there are new breeds being introduced all the time. There's a guy who's up in the southern Hawke's Bay, whose name just escapes me for the moment. But he runs a sheep expo twice a year at his place out at Wimbledon.
Oh, I think they had him on TV
Yeah,
once.
they did, and he's been on the radio and all sorts. And he has a lot of exotic sheep from all over the place, and he's about preserving those exotic breeds,
yes.
but also about introducing them into New Zealand to see how they do, and with the potential of crossbreeding into the national flock.
Okay. Gosh. So in Canada, what was the most common sort of breed that was... No, she's low.
Canada, the sheep industry in Canada is very small, which is one of the reasons I moved to New Zealand and one of the reasons I did my vet training here, because there's lots of sheep here. So all sorts of breeds, not the wool breeds, more the meat
yes.
types, what we call the terminal crosses.
Do people eat much, mutton and lamb in Canada? Is it a meat that's
It's a not probably traditionally in North America, not as much as here.
Yes, I didn't want to use the other one south of the border because I do have relatives there, and I know that when we go, because whenever we go, my son would love, to have some lamb again, and then it's exorbitant, and then it's New Zealand lamb.
Yes.
So they don't have big flocks, and it's not a common meat.
Not as common, probably maybe growing a little bit, and a lot of the cities have immigrant areas where it's more used to lamb.
Yes,
I think that's where most of my dad's lambs used to go.
Right.
I think it's a cost thing as well, though. So, I mean, traditionally, lamb has been quite expensive. I know back in the UK, you go into the supermarket and you get these 2 little lamb chops, New Zealand lamb chops in the supermarket in the UK, and they're an exorbitant amount of money. Now, I don't know I'm pretty sure it's not the New Zealand farmers that are making any money off this, but somebody is making big dollar off these 2 little tiny chops. So people are just not eating it as much as they perhaps used to, because they're not eating mutton anymore, which they were previously, and also just the price point. It's just out of most people's reach now.
Well, I was, as I say, in America, you just don't eat it because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
And of course, beef is the big beef and pork.
I think just not having the tradition of the Sunday, the roast lamb.
The roast lamb, yes.
So in the UK, that's the Easter tradition. Easter Sunday is a leg of lamb.
Right.
That's the tradition, with your roasted potatoes and all
Long
the
may that
loveliness.
continue.
Absolutely,
Yes,
and not just at Easter either. But that's increasingly going by the by now, purely on a cost basis.
On a cost basis. Well, of course, in the Jewish tradition, in Passover, you eat lamb. So that's quite, I think that must come from the East.
And Muslim Eid.
And the Muslim eat lamb. Which brings me to, of course, the difference between a lamb and a hogget, which I always get slightly mixed up in. So would one of you try and explain what the difference is?
They become a hogget when their front two teeth, their first adult teeth, come through.
Okay.
So
Which is what, about a year?
about a year old.
Which is about a year old.
So
Yeah,
anything under that is a lamb.
that's right.
So when we talk about eating lamb, it's quite young.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. And then how old would a sheep go that's still edible? I don't mean
right.
When does it get so tough that it's not worth...
You could always do something with it. Honestly, I mean, they make great sausages, believe it or not.
Okay.
So I don't think I've ever had a case where the home kill guy has said to me, "No, you don't want to do this."
Right.
In fact, you can
Especially
go.
if they're a bit fat.
Yeah,
quite
yeah,
tasty.
yeah. You can go too far the other way. If you kill them too early, you end up with some very good quality meat, but not a lot of it.
Yes, yes.
I always kill as hoggets because then they're a reasonable size, and honestly, I prefer hogget to lamb anyway.
Right. So it's
but-
over a year, but not 2 or 3 years.
No, I've killed out at 3-4 years.
Oh, really?
Um,
Okay.
Usually make sausages out of that,
Yes.
or I have done mince before now, but it's very fatty.
Well,
Oh, that might just have been my sheep.
Yes, but I think it is often more fatty than beef.
But it makes
Yeah.
great sausages.
Okay, okay.
And it's rewarding to eat an animal that you know you've raised yourself, that has never been stressed and lived a happy life.
Yeah,
I
it
think
is.
that
It really is.
that is key. When you live on a lifestyle block, you know what you're getting first of all, and you've looked after hopefully you've looked after your animals well, and that's a huge thing to know. And I think in nowadays people get so worried about, you don't know where it comes from. I mean, the supermarket makes it looks lovely, but you don't know anything about it.
No.
Don't know who bred it. You don't know where it came from, what it ate, what it was injected with. But I want to go back to when I mentioned like looking after sheep. So when let's say you went out and bought some young sheep, do you have to, inoculate them, or should they have been inoculated? And
Never assume that they've been inoculated, that
Right.
they've been vaccinated. So in the Wairarapa, your key diseases that you want to protect against, your first one's parasites, internal parasites. Second one would be clostridial diseases, which your routine vaccinations protect against, your so-called 5-in-1 vaccinations. And facial eczema we get some years and not others. That's a toxin released by a fungus in the grass. So your really warm, wet summers, particularly going
okay.
into the autumn.
Right.
You want to, and for each of those things, there's relatively simple preventive measures you can take. And a lot of it is around monitoring. So knowing whether they need drenching for parasites, whether there's toxic spores in the grass. You won't necessarily need to drench against parasites, except the exception is those clostridial diseases, where every good sheep deserves their 5-in-1 vaccination if you do nothing else, because that vaccination protects against the diseases that cause sudden death.
Okay. Right. So, and if you're in doubt, get the vet in and have them inoculated.
Yep, or just bring a vet up and have a chat.
Okay.
What do I need?
Yes. Now,
Yeah.
you mentioned drenching.
Yeah.
Is that a regular thing? You need to do that pretty regularly?
Most lambs will require drenching against worms.
Okay.
As they grow older, they'll develop a resistance to parasites.
Right.
Within a breed, there's variation, individuals, how susceptible they are to parasites and how
Okay.
early they develop that, their own innate immunity towards
Now,
parasites.
I'm going to be very stupid. Where do the parasites come from? Are they in the grass or where
Yeah,
are they?
all of the internal parasites that we're talking about, they live in the adult. The adult lives in the stomach of the sheep or intestines of the sheep. They pass the eggs out onto the grass, and the little larvae are picked up.
And
off
that's
the
how they
grass.
get passed on. So is that another reason to move sheep around so that does it affect,
That's right. Most of the larvae are close to the ground.
Yes.
So if you've got a lot of feed and you're moving them around, then you're less likely to have
Okay.
issues with parasites. So the
Yes.
parasites are less likely to affect the animals.
Right. Because that's devastating, if a sheep dies on you, especially if you've only got 2 or 3.
Yeah, and they do that. I did hear a saying that came from an English shepherd actually who said that sheep are the only one of God's creatures always looking for new and interesting ways to die. and sometimes it feels like I've lost a few and it just never gets any easier. It really doesn't.
No.
And when you've only got so few, and if I had 30,000 of them, I wouldn't know them individually, and it wouldn't probably, I don't know, maybe it wouldn't hurt quite so much. But when you've only got 20 or 30, and particularly some of those that you've had for a couple of years, some of your breeding stock, that really pinches when something happens to them.
So
they don't all look alike.
Thank you. I was just about to go on that.
They are individuals.
Yes.
Oh, totally.
And some of the shepherding dogs I've had were controlling grazing on an area, and you're out with your sheep every day, and you get to know different individuals, or you're looking at them, you can tell them apart. And interestingly, there's a British researcher who looked at sheep recognizing faces of other sheep, and they can tell apart.
Oh, really? So oh, how interesting.
They have their favourite friends that they hang out with.
Okay.
Seriously.
So they've got little personality. Well, I know they've got little personalities. I know that.
They're not stupid, though. I've seen a sheep watch while you fix a hole in the fence and then go back to check if it was really fixed. Sheep aren't as stupid as...
No, I know people always say that. Because I was fixing a caravan, and this one used to climb in with me all the time. And it was rather large, I have to say. So we had this sort of conversation that it's not a good idea to join me when I've got a drill in my hand. But yes, they do have personalities. And some are more frisky, I would say, than others, aren't they? Some are kind of a bit wild.
I used to go and help out some friends who had a block just the other side of Carston, and the first flock that they bought, I don't know where they got them from, but they were a couple of years into breeding from these girls, and they were some odd crossbreed, and these things were so flighty, and you get them into the yards and they were so nuts, they'd jump and they'd come past you at shoulder height.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was so dangerous. So we had to pin them into the corner of the yards so they couldn't move, so they couldn't jump.
Yes.
Otherwise they were going to take somebody's head off, But again, that's about the breeding, it's about where they've come from, it's about their fear of humans, their experience, or not.
Yes. So very flighty animals, if you're with them regularly, they do habituate to people.
Oh, they calm down a bit. Okay. Yeah. Yes.
There is a genetic flightiness in there as well.
Yeah, these had that. These really had that, yeah.
Yes.
But most animals you can gentle with enough time.
Yes.
But it does take time. I mean, I know some of the new small block owners that I've helped over the years, providing advice and support, and they're quite surprised when they walk out into the paddock and their animals don't come rushing over to them to be patted and petted, and it's like, well, no, animals don't generally do that. You either have to train them to it, or if you're hand feeding from
sheep
birth.
nuts do it.
Nuts do it.
Rattle the bucket a few times, and
they'll
you walk
come.
through the gate and they know.
If they've seen them before.
Yeah, they'll come, but they still don't want to be touched.
No, I've noticed that. We've had a series, because we used to only keep them about a year and then slaughter, you see. And they were very different. Every pair was a totally different lot. And I do remember the one lot, there was one who was very pushy, who would come and try and knock you over. I mean, he was quite strong. Because he wanted the nuts, and then the others, you couldn't get near them. You'd have to put it down, walk away, then they would come. So there's definitely that whole relationship thing, which I'm interested. You said earlier that it's more in the block, small holding type person whose animals are probably a little bit tamer because they handled more, or they...
I advise all my lifestyle block owners to feed their animals nuts, get them trained to nuts, and then they've got a way of controlling them, because obviously they're not going to have working dogs, and
that's what I was going to lead on to.
Handling setups.
Yes, because when we first moved onto our section, we had access to a much bigger area, and these animals would just disappear, and they were not used to coming. And I kept thinking, we need a dog, because you can't muster them to come together. So yes, to train them to get into the pen is quite important. Now, you've worked with dogs.
That's right, yeah.
They're fascinating. I love sheepdogs in the sense, when I first came to New Zealand, I'd never seen dogs work before, because in South Africa they don't use dogs. So they're usually on horseback or something, or now on little 4x4 type things, yes. So did you have to learn to work with dogs?
I did. When I was 18, I worked for a summer for a farm in Virginia in the United States that had a lot of working dogs and trial dogs, and they gave me a dog as my salary. And once I had a working dog, then I was getting 3 or 4 job offers every summer to work as a
really?
shepherd, because in Canada there weren't a lot of people who had trained dogs and who knew how
Yes.
to use dogs to herd sheep. Very different from here, where most, a lot of people a lot better with dogs than I ever was.
Okay.
Or ever will
And
be.
also here they seem to use them in pairs. I mean, not just a single dog always.
Multiples. Yeah, they use them. I see some guys out on the big sheep farms with 8, 9 dogs. If you've got a
working
big
with
mob
them.
to move.
Yes.
Depending how much ground they need to cover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And training them, that's quite a big effort. I mean, it's got
Definitely.
a long. Yeah.
It's
Okay.
not something you can learn from a book.
No. In fact, there was something on TV the other night about, I think it was somewhere in the Manawa 2, where they took in youngsters and they were trained for about a year as shepherds. And one of their big things was learning to work with dogs. And they were given dogs that as puppies sort of thing, and then had to work with them until they were fully trained. And they formed such a bond with a human.
That's right. It's very rewarding when your dog does what you tell it, and nothing more frustrating than when it doesn't.
I know. Well, I'm wondering if we shouldn't take a little break. I'm a bit confused about time because we're recording this and it's not quite the same. And I couldn't find any music on sheep. There are a lot of hymns and things about sheep and shepherds, but I was wanting to try and sort of find something. So we're just going to keep to something New Zealand. Do you know any songs that are sheepy songs beside Bob Bob Black Sheep? We're not going to have that.
I'll send you some. Send you some to play on the next program.
Okay, wonderful, because I did find one that was, I think, the Muppets about 4 sheep, and it was really to learn to count. So this is about counting the beat, so we'll go for that. Okay, let's have a break, and off we go. Let's see if it's on. Oh, God. It does help to put the Well, welcome back, everyone. You're listening to The Good Life or Living the Dream, and we're here in the Wairarapa talking about sheep. Now, there are a lot of sheep in the Wairarapa, I have to say. Now, Marnie, I wanted to talk a bit more about help you need, and I know Sarah has a lot of advice about help you need, but what would you say, if you were thinking of getting sheep, what is the help you need?
Okay, well, really, you need to make sure that you're buying good quality animals. The stock that goes up to the sales is not going to be the very best stock that somebody owns.
Because they're getting rid of them.
Yeah.
Yep.
So while they're probably still good, it's very difficult to tell unless you've got some experience in that sphere. So I would say take somebody with you, or buy through some other mechanism if it's
often
easier.
there are breeders who are selling off a few at a time.
Yeah, and it depends on who you go to. Breeders often do sell what they wouldn't consider to be their top stock, but because they're breeders, they're still very good quality stock.
Okay.
They're just not perhaps up to the show standard they require or the commercial standard they require, but you'll still get a really good animal out of it.
Okay.
It depends on like all things, you get what you pays for.
Yes.
So so I'd say if you're going to buy, that's probably the main thing to think about. But when you get them home, as we've said before, you can't just pop them out there in the paddock and forget about them. You need to check them over every day. In the summer, you probably need to check them over twice a day. Fly strike happens, and it happens fast, and the effects of it are devastating.
It's a horrible disease.
Yes. It is a horrible disease.
Do you want to expand it? Because I noticed you wrote an article in the local paper about that.
I did, yeah. So I had the first fly strike case of the season last week, and it's where the fleece on the animal has become quite long, perhaps. It becomes damp and warm because of the weather. The flies get in there, they lay their eggs, particularly around the back end of the sheep, but also other places. Those eggs hatch, and then the maggots basically eat the sheep alive. That's the long and the short of it. If you don't catch it early, they can die quite easily from it. They get infected. The skin, because the skin's open and raw, it becomes infected. It's quite nasty. Enough said.
Very painful to the
very
animal
painful,
as well.
yeah.
Do they show
and it happens
distress?
so fast.
Do they show distress?
They do. There are certain things that you can look out for. Either the sheep, the one that's been impacted, they'll often set themselves apart from the rest of the flock.
Oh, how interesting.
They'll look for shade, they'll sit down, they'll be miserable. They might still be eating, but they won't be doing a lot of it. They'll be quite miserable. They'll be twitching their tail and their back end.
Because it's sore and itchy.
And because it's itchy and it's wriggling. And the wool on the back end, or wherever the strike is, goes dark. It looks dark and it looks wet. It looks damp. And eventually, when the strike is quite well underway, that wool will fall off and you'll just get the raw skin underneath.
How awful.
It is terrible.
Now, from a vet's point of view, you've got to catch it early. Can you treat it?
Definitely. You can treat it and you can prevent it. So part of prevention is timing your shearing so that they're shorn before that warm, wet period in the autumn, which is the...
Oh, so it's autumn and you've got to watch out for that heat and
you
the
can
wet.
also, if you have a hot, wet summer, you can get it earlier as well.
Yeah.
But those warm, humid conditions...
Right. So the shearing has actually got a purpose, I mean, besides getting the wool, but it does help with health.
The flies like to lay their eggs on long wool because it's... the UV from the sun will dry those eggs out and make them less of them hatch. So that's why shearing is good for prevention. There's also chemicals you can apply to the fleece, usually 4 to 6 weeks after shearing, which have long-term prevention, which stop the flies from laying their eggs. So
shearing is one of the big things.
Shearing is one of the big things, and those chemicals applications are another one.
Yes.
And again, individual animals will be more or less susceptible to fly strike genetically. And the key thing is catching it early, keeping an eye on them, keeping them dagged, so the dirty wool around the tail, making sure that's...
Yes, please mention dagging. A lot of people don't realise that these are the sort of hands-on realities of having animals. You've got to dag them, and dagging is Cutting the
Cutting
wool
the dirty
around there.
fleece.
Taking the dirty fleece off around the back end because they've got a bit of a tail back there, and because they've got all this long wool back there, particularly if they have issues with internal parasites. Although that's not the only reason. They can get a bit of a runny bum, shall we say, and then that makes the fleece dirty, and then as soon as the fleece is dirty, it's then moist and dirty, and that's just what the flies are looking for. Absolutely what they're looking for.
Is there any particular kind of fly, or is it just general flies?
The Australian green blowfly is the worst one,
I think we've seen them recently.
and they're around.
bigger.
There's other flies that they're called secondary strikers, so they'll lay eggs where there's already some damage, or what the Lucilia cuprina, the Australian green blowfly, they will seek out anything that smells like sheep, and it doesn't have to have a wound there already.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily around the tail either. Sometimes it'll go for in between the shoulders or on the stomach. They're not picky at all. They'll
You've got to
strike
really
anywhere.
keep an eye out what's going on with the sheep.
Yes, you do. You really do. I mean, a good husbandry practice says that you would do this anyway. You get to know how your sheep behave. You get to know how they behave towards each other. You get to know their feeding patterns, because they have a definite pattern as they circulate around the paddock. They have a definite rhythm to that. So you get to know when something's not right, because it's out of what you would normally observe. But to be able to do that, you have to be normally observing. So you have to be out there every day and seeing what they're doing and noticing if something is different. It's the same at lambing time. If you're going to have a sheep that's having difficulty lambing, she'll be away, she might be struggling, she might a whole bunch of things that might be happening that would lead you to believe that she's having some difficulty. Need to go and phone the vet, need to get the vet down there quick. Because using difficulty, really, if you don't know what you're doing, it's
you
a
can
vet
do more
job.
damage.
You can do a lot more damage than good.
Yes.
So unless somebody's shown you what to do and you're competent, get the vet.
Okay.
But you wouldn't know to do that unless you understand what is abnormal behaviour for that animal.
Right. Yes. So, Sarah, is that a real issue where people don't always know, and you get to see an animal that's beyond just the beginning? It's really...
Yeah. Rule of thumb, if you see an animal started lambing, so there's fluid and tissues coming out, or you see the first bit of the lamb coming out, don't leave them more than 45 minutes. And there's something
And
wrong.
watch that the birth goes ahead.
Yep.
Yeah. And if there's a struggle, get hold of the vet.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think birthing isn't the easiest thing in any animal, as we all know.
No, but when you've got lots of legs to deal with,
Yes.
you know,
Okay, because there could be multiple births.
yeah, there can be. So what I've seen in mine occasionally, although this happens every now and again, you'll just have the nose poking out, and you'll have one foot, because the other foot's dropped and the shoulder is blocking, so the lamb can't be born because it's trying to push past its own shoulder to get through the pelvic orifice. Normally they should come out like a diver, 2 feet together.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
2 toes and a nose.
interesting.
2 toes and a nose, yeah. But they don't
And
always.
2 toes and a nose from the same lamb.
From the
Yeah,
same
well, yeah,
lamb.
preferably,
Yes. Well, I mean, in humans, breech birth is not great, and I'm a twin, and we were breech twins, which is that's why I can't spell. I tell everyone. But no, I mean, any kind of birth that has not the normal, natural way is complicated.
Yeah.
And they can get stressed and
you can
die.
have more than 2 in there. You could have 3 or 4 in there even.
Whoa.
While we're talking about births, the other thing to watch out for is pregnancy toxemia, or twin lamb disease, or sleepy sickness, it's also called, where because they have a huge demand for energy to feed those 2 or 3 fetuses inside,
yes.
and they can their metabolism can't always cope, particularly if they're on short feed. And they
Okay, so you might have to feed your animals a bit more when they are carrying a lamb.
Yeah, that last month before lambing, they should get as much feed as they want.
Yes.
Again, there's a bit of a fine line there, though, with, on lifestyle blocks. If you've got animals that are fat, you don't want them getting any fatter. So,
that sounds like all birth. You don't want it to be too fat. It's going to have problems. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, and this holds for all stock. I think if I'm right here, I think with overweight stock they sometimes struggle to get pregnant in the first place.
Yep.
And can
They're
often
very
lead to difficulties a bit further down the line too.
Let's go a little bit backwards. We're now talking about the sheep actually giving birth, but you have to have a ram around sometime.
You do.
Not everybody has a ram on a small holding. So insemination, is that a common way of doing it, or bringing a ram on?
I've seen it, but it's expensive.
Okay.
And it's usually
Not common.
Not common at all. It's usually specific breeders who are looking for specific genetics to improve an already good
so
line.
that's when they'll use insemination.
Yeah.
Okay.
Most people will just borrow a ram.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I do.
Well, on our first program, we had the story of these were all new lifestyle block, and they got the ram in, and the sheep wouldn't come near, and they escaped, and it sounded like total chaos that went on. And I don't think they got the ram to the sheep at all. But yes, so people will. How do they lend them out or rent them out, the old ram, and he does his thing in the Wairarapa?
Yeah, there's always someone knocking about. Last year I left it almost to the last minute, really. I was quite disorganised last year because I had a lot of other stuff going on. I needed a ram, so I shot down to the sales and I picked one up for $40.
But you've just told us that buying from the sales isn't always such a good idea.
No, it's not.
So why was it put on ram on the sales?
I've got 15 years of experience behind me.
Okay.
I needed a ram. He was just a regular Romney, straightforward, no messing kind of ram. All I was really looking for was just to make sure I had some lambs, so I had some ongoing something to fill the freezer with. So I wasn't actually looking for anything particularly special last year. So I trotted down to the sales and bought this ram. $40 later, stuck him in the trailer, brought him home. Drove into the paddock, opened the back door. He gave me the filthiest of looks, and I stood back, and he jumped out and had a bit of a look round and spotted the girls. Was like, right, well, this is great then, okay. And off he went.
He's been given his little harem. He's fine.
He was happy as that. Yeah, he was lovely actually. He was really calm and really relaxed. They are not all calm and relaxed.
Well, this is what I gathered from talking to other people, that there's a variety you get.
Oh yes.
Okay, so
you must have some stories around.
My father knew a man in Canada who broke both kneecaps trying to stop a ram in a race.
He did. Sorry, I didn't catch that.
He was trying to stop a ram that was running towards him in the race. Broke both
and
kneecaps.
broke his knees. Oh my goodness!
Yeah, you just don't get in their way. They're big, they're powerful.
Well, I think that's the other thing. People do think sheep are little. You know, they see all these pictures of really lambs more than anything, and a sheep can be quite big. And as I say, I know we had the one who used to butt you all the time, and I'd never turned my back on him because he was a butter. He just liked to give you a bit of. He probably thought it was a nudge, but it was actually quite strong.
Again, once you know their behavior and you're used to your animals, and if you're set up in a way that works with their natural behavior instead of against it, they're really easy to work with.
Yes.
But if you're not set up to work with their natural behavior, then they can be very frustrating.
Yeah.
And dangerous.
Yes. Well, that's the other thing people don't realise. You know, they can, and the other thing is they can stand on your foot. They're not as bad as a cow, but they can stand on you.
Steel toe cap boots are your friend.
Well, I always tell the story, and I've told it before in this program. My husband was trying to do drenching, and we had them in a smaller area, and we had a Kiwi friend, woman who'd grown up on a farm, and he's struggling to get hold of the sheep, and eventually he's under the sheep with the sheep on top of him and the drench thing out at the side, and it's like chaos. She vaulted the fence, grabbed the sheep, gave it its drench, and that was it. And we just stood there in awe because he didn't know the technique. And I think that's what I was getting at. What are the kind of skills? Someone's got to show you. Or do you think YouTube has enough information to really teach you? I think you probably have to be with another person to see how it works.
There's definitely a technique more than brute strength.
That's
catching them, tipping them up, holding them.
Yes.
And good facilities will make a huge difference as well. A lot of lifestyle blocks we go to, and they don't have appropriate place to confine the sheep, or they say that sheep out in the paddock is sick.
Yes. I know. No, well, that's exactly, this is what I was going to talk about, fencing and having, we made a little, I don't know what you'd call it, a little area that we could tempt them into with our little, what you call it, the sheep nuts, and then you were able to handle them. But even within that area, you still got to be able to, get hold of them. And calm them down enough, so, and all this sort of stuff. But a lot of places don't have races and don't have good fencing or areas at all that you can.
And that's something to think about if you want to get a lifestyle block and want to get some sheep, is getting facilities that'll make it easy for you.
Yeah, yeah.
And training them to nuts.
Yes.
And
I think it's one of the hardest things about having any kind of lifestyle animal, any kind of animal on a small block or even a larger place. If you don't have good fences, you don't have the right yards, then you don't have the facilities, the tools to be able to look after that stock properly.
Yeah.
You really don't.
Yeah.
And there is nothing so disheartening as constantly having to go and catch animals that have escaped, or constantly having to chase stock around the paddock to try and catch one because you need to do something with it. It's so disheartening. It really is.
Yeah. And it's stressful for the animal.
It's stressful for you. It's stressful for the animal.
They get worked up and everything. It's not great.
And honestly, they can die, particularly sheep, if they get stressed enough and hot enough. You run around the paddock a few times, they will literally keel over.
Oh yes, it's 100 ways to die.
Yep, that's the one. That's
one of them.
Yeah, that's definitely one of them.
Yeah.
And trying to. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to finish that off and say, so if you have the right facilities, it's much safer for you. It's much safer for them. It's less stressful for everybody. It means you can get the jobs done much more quickly, much more easily.
Yeah.
Well worth investing in.
Yes,
definitely. So if you're wanting to get into a lifestyle block and wanting to get started, start with your facilities and then have a plan for feeding, for what are you going to do if feed gets too short. Are you going to buy stock in? Are you going to eat someone? And have a animal health plan that you've worked out with your vet or with a trusted advisor that covers nutrition, covers your parasite control. When do you need to test whether they've got parasites? When do you need to drench? Prevention for fly strike, monitoring for facial eczema, so you may or may not need to treat for, and when to do the vaccinations, how to take care of an animal that's giving birth.
Okay,
and
so
just to have those things in your head or written out.
But that's very good advice. I mean, it's not the sort of at the last minute go onto YouTube or see if I can find. You really need to think that thing through beforehand.
Have a plan in advance, preparation.
That's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Now we haven't got much time, but one of the things I did want to bring up was slaughter. Now in the Wairarapa we are fortunate. We do have people who will come out to your block. Moni, you've used somebody, or do you send them off to?
No, I always for my own use. I always get them killed on site. I think it's just it's easier, and I think it's just a bit kinder as well because they don't have that stress of being bundled onto a trailer and taken somewhere.
I always find it so sad when you see a big truck going past and they're all squashed together. I know that's part of farming and everything, but yes. So there are people here in the Wairarapa. Get to know who they are, and there's some very good people, and they'll come onto your property. And they will slaughter very quickly, so the sheep isn't stressed.
No, they're very good. They're very efficient, very proficient, and then they'll take the carcass off to whichever butcher it is that you nominate, and the butcher then will do a lovely job of all the cuts that you want and bagging and small goods making and will make the best possible job of that meat that you've spent a year or 2 years or whatever it is actually nurturing and growing. I mean, you're going to put that much effort in, you want the best possible result out.
And I think too, when you have a sheep like that's slaughtered, you can think of all those different cuts that we don't normally see.
Yes.
And I go back to my childhood and think of the things that my mother used to cook. And there are still recipes out there, to use things, and we make our own sausages and all that sort of thing. So yes, a good butcher will listen to you, and they will often advise you too.
Yes, totally.
So yes, I don't think you have to throw everything away. I still haven't got used to the heart though, or the brains. I'm not into that, or the eyes. I'm not into that. But other than that thing, I'm going to start sort of. Is there anything else? Well, we haven't mentioned that you actually spin. So the other thing about sheep is wool.
Yep.
So Did you learn to spin here, or did you?
No, I learnt to spin here. It was another of those things that I'd had my eye on for several years, thinking, oh gosh, I'd really like to learn how to do that. But it was only when I got to New Zealand, where spinning is much more common than
I know
other
a lot of
places I've
the
lived.
spinning wheels made down here.
Yes, yes, there is. And then some nice ladies in Masterton at the Spinners and Weavers Guild there taught me how to spin, and I've never looked back, actually. It's the main hobby that I have. It's the main thing that I do.
Good for you. And Sarah, do you
I
have
shear and I knit, but I don't spin.
and you knit? Well, good for you, because
But I do knit.
Knitting is not always that popular. I mean, people don't knit as much. Well, they've come back a bit.
Knitting is the new black, apparently.
Oh, really? Well, I've decided I'm never going to knit again, because my jerseys and garments are so really odd shaped, I have to say. You have to think very modern with them, you know.
And the other, sheep, we've talked about the meat, we've talked about the wool and the fertilizer and the lawn mowing, and the other thing that sheep produce is milk. And there is
of course we haven't at all.
We haven't mentioned that. So they make delicious cheese, very good yogurt, and there's a local company in the Wairarapa that's making sheep milk drinks, which you can find in a couple of places.
I think we'll have to get you back and talk about milk. I'd forgotten all about that. And of course cheese, making cheese out of sheep's milk.
Yeah.
Yes. Are they a special breed, or are they also any
sheep will make milk, but some breeds make more milk than others.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Oh, we'll have to get you back about that. Well, I'm going to start winding up and say thank you again. And this has been a pre-recording, but you will listen to this probably on Good Friday at 2:30, and then it is on a Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, and you can catch us on TV on a Tuesday at 12 o'clock, Fridays at 5 o'clock, and Saturdays at 1 p.m. That's Wairarapa TV. And for those who watch YouTube, it's also on YouTube under The Good Life Arrow Radio. So thank you, Marnie, very much. And Sarah, thank you again.
Thank you.
Pleasure.